Training for a system like the ScanEagle platform is usually conducted, the majority of it's done in simulator work because flying a simulator versus flying an actual unmanned aircraft is almost identical. So we did a lot of simulator training. It took about 30 hours of sim training and then an additional couple hours at a range, which is a restricted airspace that we used in the northwestern part of the country owned by In Situ. It's actually a COA set up by the University of North Dakota for that company. So once again, we've shown that we can set up airspace for the small UAS in the NAS.
Another part of the process is to make sure that the ground-based visual observers are properly trained. 0801 is the interim guidance that pretty much lays the foundation for your operational guidance within a COA. The observers were typically a lot of our students and CFIs and other folks that had to have the proper credentials because the operation like this is ITAR restricted. So US-born citizenship and a Class 2 medical were requirements for them to be able to be out in the field and observe the ScanEagle. So once all of our hurdles were crossed and training complete and operational needs met, we were ready to get out in the field and start. There's a timeline that goes associated with that. You have to put a NOTAM in place 48 to 72 hours prior to the event, communications with RAPCON, and communications then from the ground-based observers back to the pilot in command of the UAS during the flight. So there's a very critical communication process that goes along with this. There really isn't anything unmanned about it. The phrase unmanned aerial system is really a bad phrase. The Air Force uses the phrase RPA or RPV, remotely piloted aircraft or remotely piloted vehicle. It is remotely piloted. It's piloted by skilled aviators that have credentials and ratings and certificates of a CFI, CFII, instrument commercial rated pilots, highly skilled and highly trained. The crew makeup on the ground is also trained and qualified by the proper components, whether it be through formal training within In Situ or formal ground school within the UND Aerospace system. On site, there's probably at any given time about 20 people to make sure this thing operates safely, between the ground-based visual observers, the ground crews outside that launch and recover the system, and the pilots inside the GCS. The GCS is the ground control station that actually acts like the cockpit for the aircraft, where the pilots monitor the aircraft systems. Even though our COA was issued to us on March 8th, we waited till March 23rd to fly to make sure we had everything in place and everything was prepared the right way. We took our time. We waited till we were completely ready, both operationally and maintenance, and on a higher level, speaking to other agencies before we even went out into the field and launched our first bird.
It was an exciting experience. You know, leading up to it, we talked about the preparation that goes into it and how much work goes into it. And it was very organized when we were up there. There wasn't a lot of people running around disorganized. Everybody knew their job, they did their job, and it was run very efficiently. And it was really rewarding to get that first flight. It was just under 2 hours, the first flight that we put up there. And working with the manufacturer who came in to give us a hand with our first operation, it was an outstanding experience, especially to work with the experience level of those guys. Coming in here to get us up to speed on the system we'd been trained in, but actually putting the aircraft to use in a situation like this, having not been done before, it was outstanding to have their support during this. The way the ops specs and standardization manual and safety policies and procedures are set up is just like a fixed-wing aircraft out at the airport. We followed the same path because all the safety checks are already in place with those aircraft. The pre-flight procedure is very similar to a manned aircraft. You're doing the same type of walk-around, the same inspections on the airframe, whether it's from the flight controls to the avionics, the GPS, anything that's on board the aircraft, we test completely. So comparing it to a manned aircraft, it's essentially identical. It just takes more people to operate these.